The massive viewing screen aboard the Galactic Council's flagship displayed Earth's combined fleet, a mere 300 ships floating against the backdrop of countless stars. Admiral Ross stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his weathered face revealing nothing as he stared at the 10,000 alien vessels surrounding his forces. High Commander Vex's towering figure cast a shadow across the polished floor of the conference room. His four eyes blinked in an unsynchronized pattern as he regarded the human admiral with what could only be described as amused contempt. The alien's scaled skin shifted colors slightly, from deep purple to a shade of midnight blue, a sign of satisfaction among his kind. "Your species has fought well, Admiral," Vex said, his translator converting the clicks and whistles of his native tongue into smooth English. "But surely you see the futility of continued resistance. The Council has been generous in its terms." Ross kept his face neutral, though his jaw tightened slightly. The generous terms amounted to little more than glorified slavery. Earth would be stripped of its independence, its resources harvested to fuel the Council's endless expansion, its people relegated to second-class citizens in an empire that spanned half the galaxy. 300 ships against 10,000, Vex continued, gesturing at the display with one of his four arms. "Your weapons are primitive, your shields barely worthy of the name. It would be a slaughter, and we both know it." He paused, his upper eyes focusing on Ross while the lower pair scanned data streams only he could see. "I respect your species' determination, which is why I'm offering you this chance to surrender honorably." Ross finally turned to face the alien commander. He was barely half Vex's height, but he stood straight and proud. "The people of Earth have faced impossible odds before," he said quietly. "We're rather good at surviving them." A sound like grinding stones emerged from Vex's throat, the alien equivalent of a laugh. "Admirable spirit, but spirit alone won't save your fleet from annihilation. The Council's patience has limits. Admiral, you have 24 hours to consult with your leadership and accept our terms. After that," he left the threat hanging in the air. Ross studied the alien commander for a long moment. "And if we refuse, then I will be forced to demonstrate why the Council has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years." Vex's scales rippled with patterns of deep red. A warning display. "Your species has potential, Admiral. It would be a shame to waste it. 24 hours. Choose wisely." The journey back to his flagship gave Ross time to think. His shuttle weaved between the massive alien vessels, each one large enough to swallow 3 of Earth's biggest ships. Their hulls gleamed with strange symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and move in the starlight. Technology so advanced it might as well be magic to human eyes. But Ross knew something Vex didn't. Something that made him smile slightly as he watched the alien armada through his shuttle's viewport. The Council's rule had made them arrogant. They'd measured strength in numbers, in the size of their ships, in the raw power of their weapons. They had forgotten that true innovation often came from desperation, from the drive to survive against overwhelming odds. As his shuttle docked with his flagship, Ross's comm unit buzzed with an encrypted message from Earth. The words made his smile widen slightly. "Project Phantom is ready." He thought back to Vex's condescending speech about humanity's primitive technology. The alien commander, for all his superior attitude, had fallen into humanity's oldest military trap, underestimating their opponent. The Council had ruled for 10,000 years, yes, but humans had spent their entire history fighting, adapting, and overcoming. They had learned long ago that the most dangerous weapon was the one your enemy didn't know existed. Ross walked onto his bridge, where his crew waited tensely for news. They saw his expression and stood a little straighter, a little prouder. They knew that look. It was the look of a commander who had a plan. "Send word to all ships," he ordered. "All hands to battle stations, and get me a secure line to Project Phantom. It's time to show the Council why they should have studied their human history a little more carefully." In 24 hours, Ross thought, Vex would learn that the most dangerous human weapon wasn't their ships, their guns, or even their determination. It was their ability to do the impossible. The underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains hummed with activity as Admiral Ross's shuttle touched down. Guards in plain uniforms stood at attention, their weapons carefully concealed but ready. This place officially didn't exist, and Ross intended to keep it that way. Dr. Miller met him at the elevator. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes and her gray hair escaping its tight bun, but her eyes sparkled with excitement. "You should have seen their faces when we got your message," she said as they descended deeper into the facility. "The whole team's been waiting years for this moment." "The council gave us 24 hours, Ross replied, checking his watch. 22 now. Is it ready?" "Ready enough." Miller led him through a maze of corridors, each one identical to the last. "We've tested it on single ships, even small groups. But the whole fleet at once." She shook her head. "That's never been done before." They entered a vast circular room filled with screens and holographic displays. Scientists and military personnel worked at various stations, their faces lit by the blue glow of their monitors. In the center stood a large hologram of Earth's fleet, with each ship marked by a small green dot. "Show him," Miller ordered, and one of the technicians typed rapidly at his console. The hologram changed. The green dots flickered and seemed to split, creating shadow images of themselves slightly offset from the originals. Ross watched intently as the shadow ships moved through the solid shapes of other vessels as if they weren't there. "Quantum phasing," Miller explained. "We're not just making the ships invisible, we're shifting them partially out of normal space-time. The theories existed for decades, but making it work," she smiled proudly. "That took something special." Ross studied the simulation. "And weapons, shields. That's the clever part." Miller waved her hand, and the hologram zoomed in on a single ship. "We can control exactly how far out of phase we go. Shift too far, and we can't affect normal space at all. But find the sweet spot." The shadow ship in the simulation fired its weapons, the beams passing through conventional shields as if they weren't there. "The Council's ships won't be able to hit us," Ross said slowly, "but we can hit them." "Exactly. Their shields work in normal space. We'll be operating just slightly outside it." Miller's expression grew serious. "But Admiral, there are risks. We've never attempted this with more than 5 ships at once. Coordinating 300 ships, keeping them all at exactly the right phase frequency." She trailed off. "What's the worst that could happen?" Miller met his eyes. "If the phase frequency destabilizes, the ships could shift completely out of our space-time. We'd lose them forever. 300 ships and their entire crews. Just gone." Ross walked around the hologram, watching the shadow ships move through solid objects. "And our chances of success? The simulations say 60%, maybe 70% if everything goes perfectly. Better odds than facing the Council's fleet head-on." Ross stopped walking and turned to face Miller. "How long to get the system installed across the fleet?" "It's already installed." Miller's tired face broke into a grin at Ross's surprised expression. "We've been preparing for this for years. Every ship in Earth's fleet has a quantum phase drive built into it, disguised as part of the regular engine system. The Council's scans would have seen them as simple power regulators." Ross nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. "Can you have all systems checked and ready in 20 hours? 20 hours. Miller blinked. "Yes, but..." "Good, because in 21 hours, I'm going to order the entire fleet to phase shift at once." Ross turned back to the hologram, watching the shadow ships dance through solid matter. "The Council thinks they've got us trapped. Time to show them why humans are so good at impossible escapes." "And if it fails?" Miller asked quietly. "If we lose the whole fleet?" Ross watched the simulation loop again, ships fading in and out of normal space like ghosts. "Then we'll have given Earth's ground forces a better chance than if we tried to fight 10,000 ships head-on." He straightened his uniform. "Start the preparations, Doctor. In 21 hours, we either make history or become it." As Ross headed back to his shuttle, he thought about Vex's smug confidence, his absolute certainty in the Council's superiority. The alien commander had no idea that humans had spent the last decade preparing for exactly this kind of situation. Sometimes, Ross reflected, the best weapon wasn't the biggest ship or the strongest shield. Sometimes, the best weapon was the one that made you disappear. 23 hours had passed since Vex's ultimatum. The Council's massive fleet hung in space like a wall of metal and energy, their ship's lights twinkling like artificial stars. On every bridge of every alien vessel, crews watched their displays with growing anticipation. Soon, they thought, the humans would surrender or die. Aboard his flagship, High Commander Vex stood with his arms crossed, all four eyes fixed on the human fleet. The Earth ships had arranged themselves in a tight formation, their silver hulls reflecting the distant sunlight. It looked almost beautiful, Vex thought, like a work of art about to be destroyed. They're moving into attack formation, one of his officers reported, confusion clear in his voice. But their weapons aren't powered. Shields are minimal. Vex's scales rippled with amusement. They're trying to die with dignity, he said. Admirable, but foolish. He opened a channel to Admiral Ross's ship. Your time is up, Admiral. What is your answer? Ross's voice came back calm and clear. We've considered your generous offer, Commander. A pause. We're going to have to decline. Then you choose extinction. Vex's scales darkened with anticipation. A pity. Your species had potential. He turned to his weapons officer. Target their command ships first. Make it quick and... Sir, another officer interrupted, their voice high with alarm. Energy spike across the human fleet. Some kind of. I've never seen readings like this. On the massive view screen, the human ships began to glow with a strange bluish light. It started at their engines and spread quickly across their hulls, making them shimmer like mirages in a desert. What are they doing? Vex demanded. Scan them. Now. But before his crew could respond, something impossible happened. The human fleet, all 300 ships, simply vanished. One moment they were there, gleaming in the starlight, and the next they were gone. No explosions, no warp signatures, no trace at all. Find them. Vex roared, his scales flashing danger red. They must have some kind of cloaking technology. His best officers scrambled to obey, but their scans showed nothing. No energy signatures, no distortions in space, no radiation trails. It was as if Earth's entire fleet had simply ceased to exist. Launch probe ships, Vex ordered. Search pattern Alpha. They have to be somewhere. The Council fleet broke formation, spreading out in a carefully planned search pattern. Small probe ships zipped between the larger vessels, their sensitive instruments probing every cubic meter of space. But they found nothing. In the command center of his now invisible flagship, Admiral Ross watched the alien fleet's frantic search with satisfaction. The view through his windows was strange. The stars seemed slightly off color, and looking at solid objects for too long made his eyes hurt. But they had done it. The entire fleet had successfully shifted just slightly out of phase with normal spacetime. Phase shift holding steady at point 4, his science officer reported. All ships reporting successful transition. We're getting some minor power fluctuations, but nothing we can't handle. Ross nodded, allowing himself a small smile. Status of the alien fleet. They're completely blind to us, sir. Their sensors are working perfectly. They just can't detect anything that's operating in our phase state. It's like we're ghosts. Through the strange, shifted view of his bridge windows, Ross watched Vex's mighty armada scatter in their desperate search. The Council's ships passed right through the spaces where Earth vessels floated, never noticing the ghostly fleet in their midst. Send to all ships, Ross ordered. Move into attack positions. Remember your targeting assignments. We'll only get one chance at this. Earth's phantom fleet began to move, passing through the Council's ships like spirits through walls. The sensation was unsettling. watching solid metal pass through solid metal without resistance. But the phase shift held steady, and slowly, carefully, Earth's ships took up their positions around the most crucial targets in the alien fleet. Ross watched as his fleet surrounded Vex's flagship, taking up firing positions that would have been impossible in normal space. The Council commander was still bellowing orders, still convinced his superior technology would find them. All ships in position, his tactical officer reported quietly. Ross took a deep breath. In a few moments, they would show the galaxy why humanity had survived countless threats throughout its history, not through superior numbers, not through overwhelming force, but through the one thing the Council had forgotten was possible: innovation. "Prepare to shift weapon systems back to normal phase," he ordered. "Stand by to fire on my mark." The Ghost Fleet waited, invisible and untouchable, ready to strike. Time moved strangely in phase-shifted space. Every member of Earth's fleet felt it. A slight delay between thought and action, as if the universe itself was running at a different speed. Through their viewports, the Council's ships looked like they were moving through thick water, their shapes slightly blurred at the edges. Ross kept his eyes on the tactical display, watching as his ships slipped between the massive alien vessels. The Council fleet's search pattern was growing wider and more desperate. They had no idea that Earth's ships were right in the middle of their formation, moving freely through their tight defenses. "Admiral," his communication officer called out. "Message from Dr. Miller. She says she's detected some phase variance in our rear ships. Nothing dangerous yet, but she wants to adjust the frequency." Ross nodded. "Tell all ships to hold position. Doctor, you have 5 minutes." The phase shift technology was working better than anyone had hoped, but it wasn't perfect. Small variations in the quantum field could build up over time, like ripples in a pond growing into waves. If they didn't keep it under control, ships might start shifting too far out of phase, or worse, shift back into normal space at the wrong moment. In the facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Miller and her team worked frantically at their consoles. The holographic display showed all 300 ships as ghostly outlines, each one surrounded by complex mathematical formulae showing their phase state. .03 variance in Baker's squadron, one of her technicians reported. .04 in Charlie's squadron. Miller's fingers flew over her keyboard. "Compensating. Send the new frequency calculations to all ships. They need to shift together or this whole thing falls apart." Back in space, Ross felt a subtle change in the air around him. The view through his windows seemed to sharpen slightly, then return to normal. The phase variance correction had worked. "All ships reporting stable phase lock," his science officer announced. "We're good to proceed." Ross studied the tactical display again. The Council fleet had split into 3 main groups, trying to cover as much space as possible in their search. Their formation was loose, disorganized. "Perfect. Send to all ships," he ordered. "Begin Operation Ghostfire. Target weapons only. Maintain phase shift on all other systems." Throughout the Phantom Fleet, weapons officers began the delicate process of shifting just their weapon systems back toward normal space. It was like trying to stick your hand through a wall while keeping the rest of your body on the other side. Possible, but requiring incredible precision. On Vex's flagship, the alien commander had finally stopped shouting orders. He stood in silence, all 4 eyes fixed on the empty space where Earth's fleet had been. His scales had turned a dull gray, a sign of deep confusion among his kind. 3 hours of searching, one of his officers reported. Still no trace of them. "Impossible," Vex muttered. "No species has cloaking technology this advanced. No one can hide an entire fleet this completely." Through the phase-shifted space, Ross watched the alien commander's frustration with grim satisfaction. Earth had spent decades preparing for this moment, developing technology that the Council had never even thought to look for. Now it was time to show them what that technology could do. "All ships report weapons successfully shifted to attack phase," his tactical officer announced quietly. "Ready to fire on your command." Ross took a moment to look around his bridge. His crew sat tense but ready at their stations, controlling a ship that technically existed slightly outside of normal reality. They had trained for this, but doing it for real was something else entirely. One mistake, one miscalculation in the phase frequency, and they could lose everything. But that was what humans did best, taking impossible risks to achieve impossible things. "Send to all ships," Ross ordered. "Target locked on primary targets only. Remember, we only need to disable their command and control. No unnecessary destruction." The Phantom fleet hung invisible among the Council ships, weapons charged and ready. The aliens continued their fruitless search, never noticing the ghost ships passing through their own vessels. Ross checked the tactical display one final time. Every ship was in position. Every weapon was ready. They had achieved complete tactical surprise, something that hadn't happened in Council space for thousands of years. "All ships, prepare to fire on my mark," he said quietly. "Let's show the Council why humans are so good at hiding in plain sight." The moment of truth arrived with a single word from Admiral Ross: "Fire." 300 weapon systems, precisely shifted to affect normal space, activated simultaneously. Beams of energy burst forth from seemingly empty space, cutting through the Council fleet's supposedly impenetrable shields as if they weren't there. The aliens had no warning, no chance to react. One moment their ships floated in perfect formation. The next, they were under attack from an enemy they couldn't see. Vex stumbled as his flagship shuddered under multiple hits. Warning alarms blared across his bridge as systems began shutting down. "What's happening?" he roared, his scales flashing between fear-white and rage-red. Multiple hits across the fleet. His tactical officer shouted, "Weapons fire coming from nowhere. Shields aren't stopping them." On Ross's Phantom Bridge, the tactical display showed their first strikes, hitting with perfect accuracy. The phase-shifted weapons passed straight through the Council's defensive screens, designed to stop attacks in normal spacetime. It was like trying to stop a ghost with a physical wall. "First wave successful," his tactical officer reported. 30% of their command ships disabled. No catastrophic damage. Phase shift holding steady. Ross nodded grimly. They weren't trying to destroy the Council fleet, just disable it. Precise hits to engines, weapons, and control systems. Show them that humanity could have destroyed them, but chose not to. The Council fleet erupted into chaos. Ships fired blindly into empty space, their weapons passing harmlessly through Earth's phase-shifted vessels. Some tried to jump to faster than light speed, only to find their engines mysteriously disabled. Others attempted to form defensive formations, but how do you defend against an enemy you can't see? "Main power down," Vex's engineering officer called out. "Auxiliary systems failing. We're losing control of the ship." Vex watched helplessly as more status reports flooded in. A third of his fleet was already drifting powerless in space. Another third was reporting critical system failures. And still, they couldn't find their attackers. "Launch all fighters," he ordered desperately. "Spread out. They have to be somewhere." But the fighters proved just as useless. Earth's fleet simply phased completely out of sync when the small craft passed through their space, then phased back to continue their precise strikes. It was like fighting shadows. Every time you thought you had them cornered, they simply weren't there anymore. On Earth's ships, crews worked with practiced precision. The phase shift technology required constant attention, careful power management, and split-second timing. One mistake could trap a ship forever between realities or bring it fully back into normal space in the middle of an enemy vessel. Baker's squadron reports successful hits on all targets, Ross's communication officer announced. Charlie Squadron has disabled their entire command and control network. Delta Squadron is moving to secondary targets. Ross watched as another wave of precise strikes hit the Council fleet. The alien ship's mighty weapons, capable of destroying planets, were useless against an enemy operating just slightly outside their realm of existence. All their technological superiority meant nothing because they had never imagined this kind of attack was possible. "Sir," his science officer called out suddenly. "Phase variance increasing in sections 3 through 7. The field is starting to destabilize." Ross knew they were running out of time. The phase shift couldn't be maintained forever. The longer they stayed out of normal space, the harder it became to maintain the precise frequency needed. "All ships, execute final attack pattern," he ordered. "Target their remaining command ships. Let's finish this before our advantage disappears." Earth's Phantom Fleet moved like a well-rehearsed dance troupe, each ship knowing its exact role. More precision strikes lashed out from nowhere, systematically disabling the Council's ability to coordinate their forces. Ships that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years now drifted helpless, their crews unable to even see their attackers. On his powerless flagship, Vex watched his mighty armada fall to pieces around him. The humans hadn't just outmaneuvered them. They had changed the rules of space combat itself. His scales turned the deep blue of resignation as he realized what this meant. The Council's era of unchallenged dominance was over. Humanity had just proven they could defeat the mightiest fleet in the galaxy without destroying a single ship. They had won not through superior strength, but through superior thinking. For the first time in his long life, High Commander Vex felt something he had never expected to feel toward a lesser species: fear. The mighty Council fleet drifted powerless in space, like leaves scattered by an invisible wind. On the bridge of his flagship, High Commander Vex stood surrounded by dead screens and silent controls. Emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across his gray-scaled skin. One by one, reports of system failures kept coming in through the few working communication channels. 212 command ships disabled, an officer reported quietly. 3,000 support vessels without power. 4,000 more reporting critical damage to weapons and engines. We can't even fight back." Vex stared out at his crippled fleet. Ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds now floated helpless in space, their weapons useless, their shields meaningless against an enemy they couldn't even see. His scales shifted through colors of confusion, anger, and finally settled on the deep blue of defeat. Through the phase-shifted space, Admiral Ross watched the alien commander. The humans could see everything happening on the Council ships, while remaining invisible to their enemies. It was like looking through a one-way mirror, but across dimensions of space-time itself. "Phase variance reaching critical levels," his science officer warned. "We can maintain the shift for maybe 10 more minutes. After that." Ross nodded. They had pushed the technology to its limit. "Time to end this. Open a channel to Vex's flagship," he ordered. "Audio only." The alien commander's voice came through filled with static, but the translator still worked. "Speak, Phantom Fleet. You have proven your point most effectively. This is Admiral Ross. Are you prepared to discuss new terms?" A sound like grinding stones came through the speaker. That alien laugh, but this time without any humor. "You ask about terms while hiding in whatever realm you've discovered. Show yourselves. At least give us the dignity of seeing our conquerors." Ross smiled slightly. "We're not conquerors, Commander. We never wanted to rule anyone. We just wanted to be left alone." He paused. "But if you insist on seeing us." At Ross's signal, Earth's fleet began to phase shift back into normal space. Ship by ship, they appeared like ghosts becoming solid. The Council crews watched in amazement as 300 human vessels materialized in perfect formation around their disabled fleet. Vex's upper eyes widened as he saw the positions of the Earth ships. They had been everywhere, inside his formation, between his ships, even passing through them. The tactical genius of it struck him to his core. The humans hadn't just beaten them technologically, they had outmaneuvered them completely. "Your shields and weapons are disabled," Ross continued. "Your fleet is scattered. We could destroy every ship here if we wanted to. But that's not our way." "Then what do you want?" Vex asked quietly. "The same thing we wanted when you first entered our system. recognition of Earth's independence, acknowledgement of our right to govern ourselves, and a promise that the Council will never again threaten our world. The alien commander was silent for a long moment. His scales shifted through various colors as he thought. Finally, they settled on a shade the humans had never seen before, a mix of respect and resignation. The Council has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years, Vex said slowly. No species has ever defeated our forces in open combat. Until now. He straightened to his full height. Perhaps it is time for the Council to learn some humility. On Earth's ships, warning signals were flashing. The prolonged phase shifting had strained their systems to the breaking point. Engineers worked frantically to manage power flows and prevent catastrophic failures. "Do we have your surrender, Commander?" Ross asked, keeping the urgency out of his voice. Vex looked out at his helpless fleet one last time. "You have shown us something we had forgotten was possible, Admiral. Innovation. Imagination. The ability to think beyond established limits." His scales rippled with a new pattern. "Yes, you have our surrender. And I suspect you have earned something far more valuable, the Council's respect." Ross allowed himself a small smile. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Power down phase drive systems. Return to normal space operations." He looked at the tactical display, showing Earth's small fleet surrounded by the massive but helpless Council armée. "Let's show the commander that humans know how to accept surrender with grace." The Ghost Fleet had won without destroying a single enemy ship. They had defeated the galaxy's greatest power not through superior numbers or stronger weapons, but through the one force the Council had forgotten about long ago: human ingenuity. The meeting room aboard the Council flagship felt different now. The same polished floors and towering ceiling that had been designed to intimidate now seemed to reflect the change in power. Admiral Ross sat at the grand table, watching as Council representatives from 12 different species filed in. Their body language and expressions varied wildly. Some showed fear, others curiosity, and a few displayed what seemed like reluctant respect. High Commander Vex entered last. His scales had settled into a steady pattern of deep purple mixed with streaks of silver, a color combination Ross had never seen before. The alien commander took his seat across from Ross, all four eyes focused intently on the human admiral. "The Council representatives have reviewed your terms," Vex said, his translator making the clicks and whistles of his language sound almost gentle. 3 days ago, I would have called them impossible. But you have taught us much about impossible things." Ross nodded, keeping his expression neutral. On the table between them, a holographic display showed the terms of the agreement. It was simple, really, much simpler than the demands the Council had tried to force on Earth. Independence, recognition, mutual respect. "We've also studied the readings from our disabled ships," one of the other Council members spoke up. Their crystalline body structure caught the light as they moved. "This phase shift technology of yours, it changes everything we thought we knew about space travel." "That's what humans do," Ross replied simply. "We look at the impossible and find a way through it, or around it, or in this case, slightly to the side of it." A ripple of translator-assisted laughter moved through the room. The tension began to ease slightly. These beings had ruled the galaxy through force for so long, they had forgotten what it was like to deal with equals. "There is one thing we don't understand," Vex said, leaning forward. "You could have destroyed us. Your phase-shifted weapons could have torn our ships apart from the inside. Why didn't you?" Ross smiled slightly. "Because that's not what we wanted. Earth has never sought to rule others. We just wanted to be free to find our own path." He gestured at the terms displayed between them. "That's why these conditions are about cooperation, not domination." The Council members looked at each other, their various communication methods, scales, lights, crystal patterns, and more, showing a mix of emotions. They were learning something that humans had known for a long time. True strength wasn't about who could destroy the most, but about who could achieve their goals with the least destruction. Down in the Rocky Mountain facility, Dr. Miller watched the proceedings through a secure feed. Her team had worked for decades on the phase shift technology, pushing the boundaries of what everyone thought was possible. Now she saw their work changing the future of human-alien relations forever. Back in the council chamber, Vex picked up the ceremonial signing device, a crystal pen that would encode the agreement into the council's vast database of laws. There will be those who resist this change, he warned. Some members of the council have ruled through fear for too long. They won't easily accept a species that can simply vanish from their grasp. Then we'll handle those problems when they come, Ross replied calmly. Earth has faced impossible odds before. It's kind of our specialty. One by one, the council representatives signed the agreement. With each signature, the balance of power in the galaxy shifted, not toward Earth specifically, but toward a future where intelligence and innovation mattered more than brute force and numbers. As the last signature was recorded, Vex's scales shifted to a new color, one that the translators identified as New Beginning. He stood and extended one of his four hands toward Ross. Welcome to the galaxy, Admiral. Not as subjects, but as equals, perhaps even as teachers. Ross shook the offered hand, noting how the alien commander no longer tried to loom over him. We have a saying on Earth, he said. The best victory is the one where everyone walks away having learned something. The council members nodded in their various ways. They had come expecting to add another conquered species to their empire. Instead, they had found something far more valuable. A reminder that the universe still held mysteries, and that sometimes the greatest power came not from the strongest weapons, but from the ability to think differently. As Ross prepared to return to his ship, he looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth's fleet was already preparing to share their technology with their new allies. Not because they had to, but because humans had always known something the Council had forgotten. True strength lies not in standing alone, but in teaching others to stand with you.